Well, I think you got to give credit to the crypto community for pressuring these politicians that represent them into a stance that's supportive. I think that's what happened. It took a few years, but that's what's happened. I think it's a direct response to the fact that Lummis had the limelight, not the president, and she was getting these incredibly, broad bipartisan meetings together, and they were getting bigger and faster. I mean, you had Dick Durbin sitting beside Ted Cruz right in the room I was in. I thought I was in the metaverse. I mean, that never happens. They're so diabolically opposed, but yet they were gathering to talk about crypto. And I'm not the only private investor they brought in. But in that room, I couldn't believe how bipartisan it was. It was absolutely remarkable that you have these adversaries that are at each other on every other issue that are 100% behind the initiative that Lummis is putting forward. And there were some really heavy hitters in there. Pat Toomey, Steve Daines, he's Montana, and obviously very important for hydro. Mike Rounds, Roger Marshall, Cindy Hyde-Smith, Colorado, Hickenlooper, Ted Cruz right beside Dick Durbin. I thought that was just crazy. And Debbie Steindow, John Brasso. I'm just reading down the list who was in that room. I was kind of like being interviewed for a job. Warren Davison, Rick Scott. I mean, these are really heavy hitters in the Senate. And for them to show up and it was like, I felt like I was being grilled, but I'm okay with it. It's so far, the volatility in all cryptocurrencies has been dramatic. And that's a risk, obviously, if you don't have a long-term view. But the reason you have such volatility in Bitcoin, let's take that as a staple, is there's no institutional support. If let's say you're running 100 billion, we spoke that earlier, generally you would put a 1% to 3% position in something like Bitcoin or gold or other assets like that. And if this price corrected, you would buy it back up to 3%. That does not happen with Bitcoin because there's virtually no large institutions owning it. So yes, there's risk in this nascent period, this early period. But when institutions decide to make this an asset class, I would rather be an investor before that happens than after, because the amount of capital will come into it and they'll make their own decisions about which cryptocurrencies they want. They may take a portfolio approach. But I would argue, yes, there's risk. I mean, you can put, $10,000 into Bitcoin and have it be worth $6,000 in 2 days. That's happened every year. And so I think Biden was wise because obviously by giving the credibility through an executive order to cryptocurrencies, he wants to make sure that he's not, that he's emphasizing the risk that we all know, those of us participated for years, that is inherent in this. I think what it really sets off, because I read it multiple times, and I'm trying to read between the lines
Me too.
as to what it says. And to me, it's really about which agencies are going to get what jobs. Is it the SEC? Is it, will it be the IRS? Will it be both? And I think he is setting up a competition in that executive order to decide whether the Federal Trade Commission should be involved. The interesting thing about the Lummis bill on this topic is it doesn't contemplate NFTs. And yet in Biden saying risk, NFTs, what are they? Are they a commodity or are they a security? I mean, I could argue both ways, right? And we're going to need regulation because it's one of the fastest growing categories. And there's so many use cases for NFTs that make sense to me, but I wouldn't get into them in a heavy way until we understand what the rules are. And that's exactly what this executive order is doing.